Today we're going to be talking about Virgin versus Chad lore. Yes, there's a full expanded lore. Like any good expanded spectrum, the Virgin versus Chad lore takes the dichotomy we already know, the Virgin versus the Chad, and adds granularity between them, i.e. the Virgin and the Chad, and also expands outwards, off compass, if you will, until we get horrifying monstrosities on both ends. But before I get into that, let's cover the basics. On one end, we've got the Virgin, slumped over, sad, depressed, staring at the ground, not getting laid, low sexual market value. Okay, other end of the spectrum, Chad, chest upright, strong, staring into the distance, sexually successful. The long-lastingness of the Virgin versus Chad archetypes in the collective subconscious, and the male collective subconscious in particular, I think comes down to this fact that both the Virgin and the Chad exist within us and are in conflict at all times. You know, we've all got elements of the Virgin, we've all got elements of the Chad, and those are battling out within us. But the expanded Virgin vs. Chad lore also shows that they are battling out as larger forces at play in the metaphysical universe. Let's start with the granularities, okay? The granularities between the Virgin and the Chad. As a centrist, this guy is my favorite. He's called a basic. The basic is one step above the Virgin. He's just a normal guy, probably doesn't think about any of this stuff too much. So the basic in the sociosexual hierarchy is what you would call a delta male. The delta male is in basically the middle of the pack. This is the kind of male that you'll just forget about. And the sociosexual hierarchy doesn't make much of an impact. If we're moving up the sociosexual hierarchy to the Brad is the next one on the rung. The Brad is the beta male. The beta male is the one who is supportive of the alpha. A beta male in the sociosexual hierarchy is actually not so bad because you're still pretty high up there. And the female version of the Brad is called a Brandy. Now we have a spectrum of characters that goes from the Virgin to the Chad, and it goes Virgin, normal, Brad, Chad. All right, that's the granularity between those two archetypes. Once we go past Virgin, you'll notice something. We are no longer talking just about a virgin. We are talking about someone who has internalized their virginity into their identity. And that puts us kind of in the omega male category here. There are two pathways for you if you're a virgin that wants to internalize their virginity as part of their identity. You can become an incel or a neckbeard. These are two very similar archetypes, but they are different in one key way, and that's their attitude. The incel has internalized this in a self-conscious and self-destructive way. The incel hates themselves. The incel wants to destroy Chad. The incel is actually not a sympathetic character. This is very interesting because, you know, you would expect these archetypes to be sympathetic to the incels because they're made by incels, but no, you don't want to be an incel because the incel hates Chad, and you're supposed to like Chad. The female counterpart of the incel is the femcel, and interestingly on the femcel's article, it says that she is jealous of Stacy, wants to destroy Stacy. It's a very similar thing. In contrast, the neckbeard has also sort of internalized his virginity, but he seems to actually enjoy it or not mind it or not think about it. So the virgin gets upset about a situation, might want to change it. The neckbeard just doesn't care. You're rung below the virgin. It's sort of terminal virginity, but you're still getting out there with your katana and you're slicing the world up, and that's admirable. The female counterpart to the neckbeard is the legbeard. Okay, so we go past these 2 points and we get to the wizard. Once you're a wizard, you've gone 30 years without having sex. Note that name. A wizard implies a level of magical powers, and this is something you'll notice as you go further down the virginity archetype tier list. You will get more and more dark powers that emerge from the virginity that you hold. The female counterpart of the wizard is the witch. All right, so now we move on to the wraith, and it's here where the dark power emanating around virginity manifests as actual true power. So in the description for the wraith, you know, this is a wizard who has gone off on a journey and transformed into this horrifying, terrifying, ugly creature called the wraith. Despite the wraith's hideous appearance, women cannot resist him out of pure pity. The wraith instantly loses his virginity upon returning back to his hometown, despite its reluctance to do so. Here, being a virgin is like a power move. It gives you like some level of dark, forbidden strength. And the female version of the wraith is the banshee. All right, now we're at the end of the spectrum in terms of going down the virgin rabbit hole, and we have reached Lord Gizzard, who is something of the devil in the Virgin versus Chadiverse. So the Gizzard is omniscient, but still somehow doesn't know about women's existence. All virgins and all virginity is a manifestation of this egregore, this abstract concept given physical form that works through all humans in order to propagate their virginity and give people dark power via their virginity. Okay, we've hit rock bottom. Doesn't get any lower. We're sub-omega male at this point. Let's start ascending up and let's go past alpha male. As you can see, the Thad is pretty much well aligned, much like the Chad, but with an 8-pack, a bigger bulge. Now, when we get past the Thad or the Giga Chad area, we start reaching the Lad. Now, the Lad's chin is reaching like feet off of his face. He has like something like a 13, 14, 16 pack, and his balls are so large that he needs a wheelbarrow to carry them. So, you know, at this point, it's looking kind of inconvenient. These all, of course, have female counterparts. For example, the Lad's female counterpart is the Lacey. And you'll notice that the Lacey is also a grotesque caricature of a woman. The Dad is the second most powerful Chad, and as you can see in this picture, his chin is bursting through multiple planets. And then we finally get to Gad. Gad is the god of the Virgin vs. Chad lore. Gad is the top Chad, and his form is incomprehensible, but some say he looks like this.
Instead of a conclusion, I'd like to offer some half-formed thoughts that I had while working on this video. Chads are not aspirational because they're better men, but because they further gender accelerationism. Gender accelerationism, one of the definitions of it, is basically there's a war between the sexes and it's accelerating and we must accelerate it further. I.e., women must hate men and men must hate women, and this must keep going until we essentially live in gender states. I mean, if you look at how the Chad acts, he doesn't care about women. He's not getting invested in women. Women want him. He has power over women, but women do not have power over him. Little dark. Doesn't have to be interpreted that way, but that's the undercurrent of a lot of these memes.
But this undercurrent is only present in traditional Virgin versus Chad memes, and the more recent ones are more abstract, broad, and deterritorialized.
The general frame of the Virgin versus Chad took place in a reactionary incel culture. And all culture, as we know, is downstream from reactionary incels. A lot of internet memes begin in niche online communities. And then, if they're successful, they start percolating upwards. But when they do this, they start losing their specific cultural context. And now, the Chad kind of just resembles someone who is buff, confident, and assertive, even in a genderless way, such that Ilhan Omar can be using the Chad yes meme. I really wonder, what would a female, archetype look like made by women? What would that look like? What would the virgin woman be? What would the Chad woman be? Is there a corollary? Because female virginity historically has been treated very differently from male virginity. In Asia, there are chastity arcs celebrating women who have gone 30 or 40 years being chaste as good women. I got the vast majority of the images and information for this video from a wiki, in which a minority of users make the majority of the changes, which is actually how most wikis work. With this in mind, as an anthropological piece that I'm doing here, how much of this stuff is bottom up in the sense that it's true anthropology and we're describing actual trends that are happening, or more top down, i.e. someone has planted these archetypes in the cultural subconscious and then it trickles down from an elitist perspective. On that note, hey, check this out, guys. It's the Sigma male. Look, he's got the Sigma symbol on his face and he Sigma gazes at you. You should use this in your memes. Newly and anonymously added to the wiki. A new toy for everybody to play with.